We believed we understood the toughest animal on Earth. We boiled it, froze it, and exposed it to the vacuum of space. It survived. But when we finally sequenced its DNA, we found something impossible. A huge portion of its genetic code, the very blueprint of its indestructibility, was labeled with a single word: unknown. What do you do when the most resilient creature ever discovered turns out to be not entirely of this world? In the pristine, humming quiet of the genetics laboratory, Dr. Kenji Tanaka was an artist before a strange and wonderful canvas. He peered into the eyepiece of a high-powered microscope, a universe contained on a glass slide. On the small monitor beside him, a microscopic creature tumbled through its droplet of water. It was Milnesium tardigradum, the tardigrade, the water bear, the toughest animal on Earth. Log entry, Project 1138. Kenji's voice was a low murmur, filled with a genuine scientific awe that years of research had failed to diminish. Subject continues to defy all established biological limits. We have frozen it to near absolute zero, boiled it, subjected it to pressures that would crush a submarine. And it endures. It has survived the vacuum of space. It has survived levels of radiation that should have shredded its DNA into meaningless fragments. The question is not that it survives, but how. He moved from the microscope to a small shielded chamber on the lab bench. Inside, under a quartz petri dish, was another tardigrade sample. With a few keystrokes, he initiated the sterilization protocol. An intense, violet light flooded the chamber, a blast of germicidal UV radiation, a cleansing fire that would kill any other organism on the planet in an instant. The light shut off. Kenji calmly retrieved the dish and placed it back under the microscope. He added a drop of water. For a moment, the tardigrade was a desiccated, lifeless husk. Then, as the water enveloped it, its 8 tiny legs began to stir. It unfurled, shook itself, and began to crawl, completely unharmed. It was a living, breathing paradox, a quiet violation of the known rules of life, and Kenji was determined to read its secrets. The secret, Kenji believed, was written in the language of life itself, the genome. The key to the tardigrade's impossible resilience wasn't in its form, but in its code. Later that day, he stood before the centerpiece of the lab, a massive genome sequencing machine, a monument of chrome and blinking lights. He carefully loaded the prepared tardigrade sample into the machine's receiver. This was the culmination of months of work. The process was slow, expensive, and incredibly complex, but it was the only way to truly understand the creature's biological blueprint. He watched with a familiar sense of anticipation as the sequencer whirred to life. Its screens, once dark, now filled with the cascading 4-letter alphabet of life: A, C, G, T, billions of base pairs, an entire evolutionary history, being read and decoded one letter at a time. Somewhere in that waterfall of data was the gene, or genes, that allowed a microscopic animal to sleep in the vacuum of space and shrug off lethal radiation. It was a biological superpower, and if he could understand it, he could perhaps replicate it. The applications were staggering. New radiation therapies for cancer patients, new methods for preserving organs, perhaps even new ways to protect astronauts on long journeys. The potential was limitless. He initiated the final analysis program, a piece of software that would sort the torrent of data and map the genome overnight. He left the lab feeling the profound hope that only a scientist on the verge of a great discovery can know. The machine would work through the night, and in the morning, he was certain he would have his answer. The alert from his phone was a shrill, intrusive sound that tore through the quiet of his apartment at 3 a.m. The sequence analysis was complete. Adrenaline chased away the sleep. Kenji threw on his clothes and rushed to the lab, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. He burst into the dark, silent laboratory, the only light coming from the glowing main monitor of the sequencer. The program had finished its work. On the screen was the final analysis, displayed as a simple, elegant pie chart, breaking down the tardigrade genome by its evolutionary origin. Kenji stared at it, expecting to see a circle of almost solid blue, labeled Anomaly, but that's not what he saw. His breath caught in his throat. A massive slice of the chart, nearly 20% of the entire genome, was a chaotic mosaic of other colors. The label read, Non-Animalian Horizontal Gene Transfer. His mind struggled to process the data. Horizontal gene transfer, the process of one organism acquiring DNA from another, was common in bacteria, but on this scale, in a complex animal, it was unheard of. A second chart appeared on the screen, specifying the sources of this foreign DNA. There were slices from archaea, the ancient extremophile microbes. There were slices from bacteria, from fungi, even from plants. Kenji felt a wave of dizzying disbelief. The tardigrade wasn't just an animal, it was a chimera, a biological thief that had stolen the best survival tricks from every other kingdom of life on Earth. But it was the last slice of the pie that made the blood run cold in his veins. It was the second largest segment of foreign DNA, a significant, terrifying portion of the whole, and its label consisted of a single word: unknown. His face, moments before alight with the hope of discovery, was now a mask of utter, profound confusion. The result wasn't just unusual, it wasn't just a breakthrough, it was impossible. The data, the bedrock of his science, was presenting him with a fact that felt more like a message from a dream. The most indestructible animal on Earth, it seemed, was not entirely of this Earth at all. A fact is a stubborn thing. An impossible fact is a torment. For 3 days and 3 nights, Dr. Kenji Tanaka lived in the sterile, humming confines of his laboratory, a man at war with his own discovery. His first duty as a scientist was to be his own greatest skeptic, to try and kill his beautiful, impossible result before it led him into fantasy. The process became a ritual of obsessive repetition. He would meticulously sterilize every piece of equipment in the autoclave, baking it at temperatures that would annihilate any stray microbe. He opened new, cryogenically sealed samples of tardigrades, ensuring no cross-contamination. He recalibrated the sequencing machine, running diagnostics, until he was certain of its flawless operation. He would initiate the sequence, and for the long hours that the machine worked, he would wait with a knot of hope and dread in his stomach. The hope was that he had made a mistake, that the world would make sense again. The dread was that he hadn't, and each time the result was the same. A new pie chart would bloom on the screen, a colorful flower of statistical impossibility. Nearly a fifth of the tardigrade genome was a mosaic of borrowed and stolen DNA, and the slice labeled unknown remained, a dark, silent continent on the map of life. After the 4th identical result, Kenji leaned back, exhausted. This wasn't an error. It wasn't contamination. He was dealing with a fact. Armed with his printouts, Kenji went to see the one person whose opinion he valued above all others, his former mentor, Dr. Evelyn Reed. She was a titan of evolutionary biology, a woman whose office was a testament to a life spent defending Darwinian principles, its walls lined with prestigious awards and framed book covers. Kenji nervously laid the data on her desk, the damning pie charts looking small and insignificant in the grand, intimidating room. Dr. Reed scanned the pages, her sharp eyes taking in the columns of figures. Her initial expression of academic curiosity slowly tightened, like a shutter closing. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a severe, almost angry disapproval. "This is contamination, Kenji," she said, her tone as sharp and sterile as a scalpel. She didn't look up from the papers. "It's sloppy work, a rookie mistake." "Evelyn, I've run it 4 times, Kenji insisted. "The controls are clean, the samples are pure." "Then your software is misinterpreting the data," she countered, finally looking at him. To even suggest that a complex animal acquired 20% of its genome through horizontal transfer is pure fantasy. To suggest a portion of it is from an unknown domain. She let out a short, sharp sigh of disappointment. "You are chasing a ghost, Kenji. A statistical artifact. Drop it." before you try to publish this discovery and ruin a very promising career." She pushed the printouts back across the desk, a clear and final rejection. The establishment had not just spoken, it had passed sentence. That night, Kenji sought a different kind of counsel. He found his friend, Dr. Anya Sharma, in the cool, dark dome of the astrophysics lab, surrounded by the silent, looming shapes of telescopes. Anya was a pragmatist, a scientist who dealt in the hard, unforgiving numbers of the cosmos. As Kenji explained his findings, spreading the printouts under the faint red glow of the observatory lights, she listened with a skeptical but not unkind focus. "Panspermia? You're serious?" she asked, her eyebrow raised. "Life drifting between the stars?" She turned to her computer and pulled up a simulation, a flurry of equations resolving into a stark visual. "Kenji, look," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "The sheer radiation of interstellar space, the hard vacuum, the cosmic rays, it's a sterilizing bath, and that's before you even get to a planet. The heat of atmospheric entry would incinerate any organic molecule known to man." She pointed to the simulation, where a small object representing a microbe was vaporized in a flash of light. "It's a statistical and physical impossibility for life to travel between stars. Biology is a local phenomenon." She presented the hard physics as an unbreachable wall. His theory wasn't just biologically improbable, it was physically impossible. Kenji returned to his lab, the warnings of his mentor and the cold physics of his friend ringing in his ears. He was cornered, his theory assaulted by biology and astrophysics alike. But the data was still there. The unknown slice of the pie still beckoned. If he couldn't prove where it came from, perhaps he could find out what it did. Undeterred, he focused his analysis on the unknown segment of the genome, isolating a specific, lengthy gene sequence that had no terrestrial counterpart. He began to run a simulation, not of its origin, but of its function. On his monitor, a 3D model of a DNA strand appeared, damaged and broken by simulated heavy radiation. Then, the proteins coded by the alien gene were introduced. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. The proteins swarmed the damaged DNA, acting like a team of microscopic surgeons. They snipped away the damaged sections, pulled new base pairs from the surrounding medium, and stitched the strand back together with an efficiency and speed that was orders of magnitude greater than any known terrestrial repair mechanism. It was a biological engine of impossible power. He stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across his face. This was it. This was the source of the tardigrade's power. This was the smoking gun. It wasn't just a random string of code from a mysterious source. It was a piece of hyper-advanced biological technology. He might not know the language it was written in, but he could now see, with perfect clarity, exactly what it was saying. The smoking gun was a hyper-efficient gene with no terrestrial address. It was the engine of the tardigrade's indestructibility, a piece of biology so advanced it felt alien. But this fact had only isolated Dr. Kenji Tanaka further. His mentor, Dr. Reed, had dismissed him as a fantasist. His friend, Dr. Sharma, had shown him that the physics of space travel made his theory an impossibility. He was a man with a key to a door that physics claimed did not exist. He stood in his office late at night, staring at a question he had scrawled across his whiteboard in thick black marker. If not from Earth, then from where? For days, he had been trying to reconcile the impossible biology with the impossible physics. He had been trying to fit this extraordinary anomaly into the familiar box of terrestrial evolution, and it wouldn't fit. In a sudden moment of profound clarity, he realized he was asking the wrong question. He had been working from the assumption that the tardigrade was an earthly creature that had somehow acquired alien DNA. He had to reverse the premise. He picked up an eraser and with a few broad strokes, wiped the question from the board. He uncapped his marker and wrote a new title, a new mission statement for his life's work. The letters were bold, decisive, and borderline heretical. Project Panspermia. He was no longer a geneticist studying a bizarre terrestrial animal. He was an astrobiologist, hunting for the origin of a creature that may have fallen from the stars. His entire world had shifted on its axis. His new hypothesis demanded a new line of inquiry. If the tardigrade's unique genetic toolkit was extraterrestrial, then its building blocks must exist somewhere beyond Earth. The next day, Kenji found himself in the university's geology department, in a sterile lab filled with the silent, stony visitors of our solar system. He was surrounded by meteorites. He focused on one in particular, a fragment of a carbonaceous chondrite meteorite, a type known to be rich in the complex organic molecules that are the precursors to life. With painstaking care, he crushed a small sample into a fine dust. His plan was audacious. He would use the unique proteins coded by his alien gene as a biomarker. He was going to search for the specific chemical ingredients of the tardigrade's impossible repair mechanism inside the dust of a 4-billion-year-old space rock. He loaded the sample into the lab's mass spectrometer, a machine that could identify molecules by their precise mass. The process was slow as the machine analyzed the sample, atom by atom. He was hunting for a ghost, a specific chemical signature that had no business being there. He was applying the most rigorous scientific method to an idea that most of his colleagues would consider science fiction. It was a shot in the dark, but it was the only shot he had. Word of Kenji's strange new research traveled quickly through the university's hallowed halls. His frequent visits to the geology department had not gone unnoticed. A week later, he was summoned to the Dean of Science's office. Dr. Evelyn Reed was already there, her posture rigid with indignation. "He is using the university's resources to chase sensationalist nonsense," Reed stated, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She spoke to the dean, but her eyes were fixed on Kenji. "He is claiming to have found alien DNA in a common microorganism and is now attempting to link it to meteorites. He will make this entire department, this entire university, a laughingstock." The dean, a mild-mannered man caught in the crossfire between a protege and a titan, looked at Kenji with deep concern. "Alistair, your work has always been exemplary, but Dr. Reed has a point. These are extraordinary claims. Until a formal review of your findings can be completed, I am restricting your access to all cross-departmental labs. That includes the Meteorite Analysis Lab." Reed had won. She had used the weight of her reputation and the institution's fear of ridicule to build a wall around him. He was being shut down, not because his theory was disproven, but because it was too radical to even consider. He was isolated, his primary line of investigation severed by bureaucracy. That night, the Meteorite lab was dark, save for the glow of a single computer monitor. Kenji was not alone. Anya Sharma stood beside him, her arms crossed, a look of deep skepticism mixed with reluctant curiosity on her face. "I still think this is a dead end, Kenji," she said, her voice a whisper. "The physics hasn't changed, but..." She trailed off, her eyes on the mass spectrometer. "That gene sequence you showed me, the repair mechanism, it's elegant. I want to see this for myself." She had agreed to help him run one last unsanctioned test. Kenji loaded the carbonaceous chondrite sample one more time. The machine whirred to life, beginning its slow, methodical analysis. They waited in silence, two scientists from different worlds, united by a single, impossible question. The graph began to form on the screen, a jagged line of chemical noise. Kenji's heart sank. It was another failure. But then, Anya leaned closer to the screen. "Wait," she breathed. "There." She pointed a finger at the monitor. A spike was emerging from the noise. It was faint, almost a ghost. But it was there. A clear, distinct signal at a precise point on the mass spectrum. Kenji brought up the data from his own lab, the readout of the proteins from the alien repair gene. He overlaid it on the new results. The spikes matched. They matched perfectly. The signature was there. Anya stared at the screen, her skepticism visibly shattering, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated awe. Her understanding of the universe was being rewritten by a faint line on a graph. "My God, Kenji," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The ingredients, they're in the rock." The secret discovery in the Meteorite lab had felt like a victory. For 12 hours, it had fueled a quiet, fierce hope in Dr. Kenji Tanaka. That hope was extinguished by a live-streamed university seminar. He sat in his small office, watching his mentor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, command the stage. She was presenting on methodological rigor in exobiology, but Kenji knew it was really about him. A slide appeared behind her, showing data points from a mass spectrometry reading of a carbonaceous chondrite. His data. "There is a worrying trend in fringe science," Reed announced, her voice resonating with unimpeachable authority, "to seek extraordinary conclusions from ambiguous data. Trace proteins found in meteorite samples, for instance," she said, gesturing to the slide, "are almost certainly the result of terrestrial contamination from the lab itself. It is the most parsimonious explanation. Before we entertain fantastical notions of alien intervention, we must first exhaust the mundane possibilities of human error." She didn't have to say his name. The online chat log, visible on the side of Kenji's screen, did it for her. Comments from academics around the world flashed by. Classic contamination issue. Heard a genetics guy was chasing this. Embarrassing. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This isn't it. Reed had taken his private discovery, his secret hope, and publicly executed it with the cleanest, most respected weapon in the scientific arsenal: doubt. She had turned the community against him before he could even formally present his case. She didn't even engage with the data, Kenji said that night, slumped in a chair in Anya Sharma's astrophysics lab. He looked dejected, a man professionally checkmated. She just waved it away as a mistake. Anya, now a firm convert to the biological mystery, looked at him with sympathy. "I know, Kenji, and she's wrong to do that, but we might have a bigger problem." She turned to her main console, her expression serious. "Okay," she said. "Let's say the biology is right. Let's say your protein is from space. We still have a physics problem, a big one." She pulled up a complex simulation. A small, oblong object, representing a tardigrade, drifted through the blackness of space before falling into the gravitational pull of an Earth-like planet. The moment it hit the upper atmosphere, the simulation became a wall of brutal physics. The object glowed, then turned white-hot, its trajectory a fiery streak that ended in complete vaporization. "The heat of atmospheric entry would exceed 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit," Anya said, her tone grim. "It would destroy any organic molecule, Kenji, bioshield or not. It's a wall of fire. Nothing survives." The simulation replayed itself, the tiny object once again being annihilated in a silent digital inferno. The universe, it seemed, had its own gatekeeper, and it was called thermodynamics. Kenji's theory was biologically plausible but physically impossible. Defeated, Kenji retreated to his lab. The path forward was blocked by the very laws of the cosmos. He sat at his microscope, idly reviewing slow-motion footage he'd shot weeks ago. It showed a tardigrade entering its cryptobiotic turn state, the process of extreme dehydration that allowed it to survive harsh conditions. He'd seen it 1,000 times, the creature losing water, its 8 legs pulling in, its body contracting into a tiny, lifeless ball. But this time, watching the footage with defeated, unfocused eyes, he noticed something new. A detail he had always overlooked. As the tardigrade curled up, its cells didn't just dry out. They secreted a clear, viscous substance, a liquid that under the microscope's light instantly hardened into a glassy, perfectly smooth shell. The creature wasn't just dehydrating, it was encasing itself in a suit of biological glass. An idea flashed into his mind, a jolt of pure adrenaline. He leaned so close to the screen his nose almost touched it. "It's not just a suspended state," he whispered to the empty room. It's a vehicle, a biological ablative shield. He grabbed his phone and called Anya. I was wrong, he said, his voice crackling with excitement. I told you it had a bioshield. It doesn't. It makes one. It vitrifies itself. It turns into glass. He rushed to her lab, his new theory tumbling out of him. Anya was skeptical at first, but the concept of vitrification, a sugar-based glass shell, intrigued her. Ablative cooling, she murmured, typing furiously at her keyboard. Through glycosylation. It's insane, but... She began inputting a new set of variables into her atmospheric entry simulation, modeling the physical properties of a glassy sugar matrix designed to flake away under extreme heat. They watched together as the new simulation ran. The object entered the atmosphere and began to glow just as before. But this time, something different happened. The outer layers of the glassy shell superheated and peeled away in fiery streaks, carrying the deadly thermal energy with them. Layer after layer burned off, protecting the core within. The object, smaller now, breached the lower atmosphere and landed, its core temperature well within the bounds of survivability. It had made it. Anya looked up from the screen, her face filled with absolute, wide-eyed astonishment. She looked at Kenji, then back at the simulation. It works, she said, her voice a whisper of pure awe. The little thing is a spaceship. The simulation was a promise, but a simulation is not proof. Dr. Kenji Tanaka and Dr. Anya Sharma now had a plausible theory, a beautiful, elegant model that showed how a tiny creature could sheathe itself in biological glass and become its own spaceship. To prove it, they had to move from the clean, theoretical world of computer code to the hot, dangerous world of a physical experiment. They needed to build a star and throw a tardigrade through it. They found their star in the university's high-energy engineering lab, a place they had no authority to be. Anya, using her credentials as an astrophysicist, had booked the lab under a deliberately vague pretext. Testing novel heat-shielding materials for a deep space probe. That night, under the harsh industrial lights, the lab buzzed with the power of a contained sun. Anya stood at the controls of a plasma torch capable of generating temperatures hotter than the surface of a star. Kenji, his hands steady, carefully placed a small sample of vitrified, tun-state tardigrades into a vacuum chamber. This is wildly outside protocol, Anya said, her voice a tense mixture of fear and exhilaration. If we're caught, we're both finished. Our careers, everything. Kenji nodded grimly, his eyes fixed on the sample. It's the only way to know for sure. He gave Anya the signal. She took a deep breath and engaged the plasma torch. The experiment began with a deafening roar and a flash of blinding light. A searingly bright jet of argon plasma, a man-made star, engulfed the sample chamber. Inside, the vacuum-sealed container holding the tardigrades glowed a furious cherry red, simulating the brutal, fiery crucible of atmospheric entry. Kenji and Anya watched the monitors, their faces illuminated by the violent light, their own careers burning on the altar of this one, heretical experiment. At that exact moment, the lab door slammed open. Dr. Evelyn Reed stood there, flanked by the university dean and 2 security guards. Her face was a mask of cold, triumphant fury. I knew it, Reed said, her voice cutting through the roar of the plasma torch. An unsanctioned experiment with university property, falsifying credentials to book the lab. She pointed a finger at them. Shut it down. Now, you're both finished. The dean stepped forward, his expression grave. Dr. Sharma, Dr. Tanaka, terminate this procedure immediately. Anya's hands hovered over the controls. Her entire career, her reputation, her future hung in the balance. She looked at Kenji, then back at the monitor showing the experiment's timer. 5 more seconds. With a small, defiant tilt of her chin, she let the program finish its cycle. The plasma torch cut out with a final, echoing hiss, plunging the lab into a sudden, tense silence. The silence in the lab was thick with scorn. Dr. Reed and the dean stood with their arms crossed, watching as Kenji, with forced calmness, allowed the sample chamber to cool. They were waiting for the inevitable failure, ready to finalize the professional execution of two rogue scientists. Kenji carefully removed the small sample container. It was scorched but intact. He carried it over to a powerful digital microscope, connected to a large wall-mounted screen, so everyone could witness the result. With Reed and the others watching, he placed the sample under the lens and added a single drop of water to rehydrate the desiccated husks of the tardigrades. For a long, tense moment, the screen showed nothing but inert, microscopic debris. They looked like tiny, burnt specks of dust. Reed allowed herself a small, cruel smirk of vindication. It was over. And then, one of the specks moved. A leg, impossibly small, twitched. Then another. One of the husks began to slowly, gracefully, unfurl. It reanimated, its body plumping with water, its legs beginning to paddle as if swimming. A collective, involuntary gasp filled the room. Another tardigrade began to stir. Then a third. They were alive. They were crawling. They were unharmed. Anya covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Kenji just stared, a slow, wide smile of pure triumph spreading across his face. He looked at Reed. Her face was ashen, her mouth slightly agape. Her entire worldview, the dogmatic certainty she had built over a lifetime, had just been shattered by the sight of a microscopic creature crawling across a screen. The tiny animal had stared into the heart of a sun and had not blinked. The scientific method, in its purest form, had delivered its verdict. Years later, the Astrobiology Institute was a testament to a paradigm that had been shattered and rebuilt. It was new, it was bustling, and its co-directors, Dr. Kenji Tanaka and Dr. Anya Sharma, were two of the most respected names in science. Their work had forced biology to look to the stars, and astrophysics to look for the signatures of life. Kenji sat at his workbench, looking at a tardigrade through a microscope. He smiled, a quiet, familiar greeting to the tiny creature that had changed his life. He then looked up, across the bright, busy lab, to a massive, high-resolution image that covered the entire far wall. It was a photo from the James Webb Space Telescope, a deep-field image showing a sliver of the night sky, burning with the light of 10,000 distant galaxies. His gaze lingered on the countless points of light, each one a potential source, each one a possible destination. The search was no longer just about life on Earth. It was now and forever about finding its home. What makes the story of Dr. Tanaka and the spacefaring tardigrades so compelling isn't just the incredible science fiction concept at its heart. It's the very human drama about the nature of belief itself. This wasn't a simple battle between science and superstition. It was a battle of science against its own dogma. The true antagonist wasn't a monster or an alien force. It was the scientific establishment, personified by Dr. Reed. She used the very tools of reason, the principle of parsimony, the demand for rigor, the suspicion of contamination, to shut down a truth that was too radical for her worldview to contain. The story reminds us that science is not just a collection of facts, but a human endeavor, susceptible to pride, fear, and the comfort of the status quo. Dr. Tanaka's journey wasn't just about proving his data was right. It was about having the courage to follow that data into intellectual exile. He had to defend an impossible truth against the very institution he dedicated his life to. It highlights a timeless struggle, the brilliant, inconvenient fact fighting against the powerful established theory. It makes you wonder about the line between healthy skepticism and rigid disbelief. So, here's a question for you. When have you ever encountered a fact that challenged your entire worldview, and what did it take for you to accept it?